a seminar titled America After the Midterms. I'm James Thompson, Director of the Garfield Center for Public Leadership here at Hiram College. And as always, we are going to begin this event with a question. So the first question of the evening is, who can tell us the name of the fourth President of the United States? James Madison, absolutely. And if I was to ask you in casual passing when I saw you on the street, what is James Madison famous for? What would you say?
Separation of church and state.
Okay. All right. Okay, excellent. Anything else?
Got a hand up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Federalist Papers. So James Madison contributed substantially to the Federalist Papers, which are the repository of the great philosophical insights of American political philosophy. He did it along with two other characters. Anybody know their names? Hamilton and John Jay. Exactly. And in the course of writing these papers, probably the most famous one, or one of the most famous, and certainly one of the most important, is Federalist 10. Some of the people in the audience know this only too well because they're in a class about it right now. If I was to say to you or ask you, what is the key theme of Federalist 10, what would you say?
Factions.
There we go. That, I know how to translate that. That's factions. So yeah, so it's about factions and how factions form in a democracy. And what he says is that when you have democracy, you always have factions. To get rid of factions would be to get rid of democracy itself. In fact, there are two things you need to do in order to not have factions. Some of you know what that is, and I'm tempted to call on you, but I'll just tell everyone. You'd have to get rid of liberty, which we don't want to do because we like democracy, and you'd have to make everyone think the same thing, which of course would be the end of human nature. And so we have factions we can't get rid of. So I'd be actually very curious to hear if someone who's not in my class could tell us this. What is Madison's solution if you can't get rid of factions? What do you do? You're thinking to yourself, I didn't come here to be innocent, but I am what I am. Yes? What was that?
Have more of them.
Have more of them. More factions, that's one answer. What he tells us is you have to mitigate their effects, or you have to control their effects. And what he says is the way you control their effects, in no small part, is to have a big country, and you spread them out, and you kind of dilute them, but you're never going to get rid of them. And they're always going to be factious. They're always going to have tension between them. It's always going to be a debate. You just can't get rid of it. And what we've had for most of our history in this country is very intense debate between factions. It's often very ugly. But it's Madisonian. It kind of works. They balance each other out. They switch places of who's on top from one year to the next, but it keeps going. And what a lot of people have been concerned about over the last few years is the thought that maybe this Madisonian factional balance has gone off the rails, that maybe we're into a new era, and that system is breaking down. And part of the reason it's hard to tell if our system is breaking down is because there have been a lot of times in American history when things have gotten very bad. This is hardly the only time in American history when the competition and the discussion between the factions has gotten really ugly. Everyone has maybe their own favorite time in American history where it got very bad. Mine was during the time of the 6th and the 7th American president. Can anyone tell us the names of the 6th and the 7th American president?
Adams Jackson.
Yeah. Ken Moore, by the way. Hiram grad. Liberally educated. Well, yeah. I take all the credit. He went to Harvard, but I think Hiram gets all the credit. So, yeah. So, John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. And it was ugly. Ugly to the point that Jackson was sort of, claiming that what Adams said about Jackson's wife helped lead to her death. It was bad. And as a result of this kind of history, the challenge for right now is to figure out how bad is it. How do we do that? And if you're a political scientist, you look to other examples outside the United States to try to think about, okay, well, if another country went through a similar situation, how do we use that to analyze where we're at? So here's a question. Let's suppose we're looking for another big country that lasted for a while, that was very powerful, that had very vigorous factions, and had a system in which the richer and the not so rich each had a voice. And we want to look at what happened to that state to try to understand our state. Where would you go look?
Rome.
Rome, who said it? Thank you. Yeah, you look at Rome, it's the most obvious example. And if you're going to use the most insightful analysis of what happened to Rome to understand American politics, to whom would you turn for those insights? The deepest scholar of the factional strife, Niccolo Machiavelli, who was the founder of, in many respects, modern political philosophy, a Renaissance philosopher, and he looked at what happened in Rome. And he said the factions were intense, and they were hard-hitting, and there were even riots in the streets, but it was good because it made Rome strong. But eventually, it went off the rails. And if you want to sit through my class, I can give you the long answer. But if you want me to just tell you, I'll just tell you. And what the key moment in the collapse of the Roman Republic, leading to Julius Caesar, was when large sections of the two factions, the not so rich and the richer, both lost faith, and Machiavelli says, faith in the magistrates. They lost faith in the government, in the structures of government, and in the mores of how to operate in the system. They lost faith in the system. And if you just take what Machiavelli analyzed and look at how it compares to our modern American experience, and you think about what's happened in particular in the last few years about people on both the right and the left seemingly losing faith in the system, either the structures of government or the ways of being in our government and how to treat each other, we should be frightened, if we care about the future health of this country, that we are mimicking the best example of a collapse of a factional system as explained by its greatest student. We should be concerned. We're here tonight because we're concerned. That being said, we then had an interesting event occur in 2022 called the midterm elections. And I suspect many of you know what happened in the midterms. Does anyone know, as a result of the midterms, what the balance is now in the House of Representatives between Democrats and Republicans? Does anyone know the numbers? 4 seats? 5 seats? 9 seats? We have 2 experts in politics. Do they know?
I think it's 4 or 5, counting George Sundberg.
It's so close, we're not even sure how close it is. In the Senate, what are the numbers in the Senate? 51-49. It's almost mathematically impossible to have it closer. Now, next question. When that Congress went to Washington, were the people who won those elections primarily people who were against the system and saying we need to throw the system out, or the people who in general were in favor of working within the system? Actually, no. A significant number of the people who won were the people who were not the ones saying, let's get rid of the system. So if you care about American politics, you'll look at that Machiavelli example, and you see what happened in the midterms. This is really interesting and potentially encouraging news. And so what we're here today to do is talk about America after the midterms and what is possible in this country in terms of policy and politics and cooperation and civility. And it opens up potentially a new chapter. We potentially just step back from what might be described as a Machiavellian abyss. That's encouraging. But it's not enough to just send people to Congress. We actually have to talk to each other. We have to converse, and we have to enact the spirit of that election, not only in Congress, but amongst ourselves. And that's what we're doing here today. We're not just going to talk about policies after the midterm and the possibilities of policy, but we're going to model civility. To do that, we have brought you a bona fide Democrat, General Wesley Clark, and a fully confirmed Republican, Secretary Andrew Card, and we'll have a student come up here in a moment and give some proper introductions. But the purpose here is to have two gentlemen who have very different perspectives on politics talk about the same issues and do it in a way that is civilized and meaningful. I know that General Clark is a Democrat because he ran for president as a Democrat. Does anyone know, I know at least one person in the audience knows, when he ran for president? 04. In fact, we have a gentleman who was the campaign, campaign lead figure, in 04. By the way, I have a question for General Clark. There was a gentleman who ran against you in that primary from Northeast Ohio. Do you remember his name?
Actually, I don't.
Dennis-
Correct, Dennis Kucinich.
Dennis Kucinich, absolutely right.
I like Dennis Kucinich. He was a good man. I liked him. He was nice. He was a nice fellow on the campaign trail. We said hello to each other. We had different opinions on a lot of things, but he represented a real, strong set of opinions and defended them well.
Yeah, I think there are lots of Dennis friends in this audience. In fact, people who have known him for many years. So he is a Democrat. This is Secretary Card, who, as I mentioned, is a Republican. He served in each of the 3 Republican administrations prior to the Trump administration. Now, here's a question for a student, and you have to be a student to answer. What are the names of the 3 Republican administrations prior to Donald Trump? Yes.
Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush.
Excellent. It's not actually a coincidence. She's also introducing these gentlemen. So she literally wrote that a few days ago. So that was student advantage. So we are going to have a real conversation between people who are not from the same political background, which is wonderful. I think it's particularly appropriate we're doing this at Hiram College. I'm very proud to say that this is an institution of higher education where we still have real discussions among people who disagree. As President Haney will say, and I've heard him say it many a time, we are not an echo chamber, and we will not become an echo chamber. This is not a place where everyone agrees with each other and sits around complimenting each other for being right. We have liberal and conservative students, we have liberal and conservative professors, and we come here every day, we talk, we have classes. It happens in my class where students of very different persuasions have civilized conversations, recognizing that they disagree. I'm very proud of that fact. I think it's also very nice that we are operating in the legacy of James A. Garfield, who is the namesake of our program, the Garfield Center. He was a former president of Hiram College, and he brought an elevated, sophisticated, decent approach to political discourse that we are here carrying on that legacy. I think that's very nice. The other thing we're doing tonight is we're launching a partnership. I would say actually it was launched when General Clark came here in the fall. It was announced, but now we're enacting it. And what's going on here is that the Garfield Center in particular, Hiram in general, is partnering with General Clark's organization called Renew America Together, because the General has devoted his life now to promoting the idea of civil discourse and useful conversation amongst Americans. He takes it that seriously. We take it so seriously that we've established an agreement with his organization to move forward as partners, which is something I'm very pleased about. And he has a part of his organization called the Civility Leadership Institute, which trains you up, familiarizes you with, exposes you to the experience, the phenomenon of civil discourse. He's had cohorts go through that program already. We are working with his team as we speak to have a Hiram-associated cohort matriculate through that program. And so what we're doing tonight is having a conversation that is the beginning of many conversations. And I'm very proud of what we're doing, and I'm delighted you guys can be here at the start of this. One other organization is also involved in this, and I'm very pleased to say it's Cuyahoga Community College. They are here tonight. Tri-C, for those of you who don't know, is the oldest and the largest community college in Ohio. And they are an institution that educates people from diverse backgrounds, particularly diverse financial backgrounds. They make education, good education, available to everyone. And as it turns out, that's what Hiram's mission is. I was once told by a gentleman who's here, I'll introduce him in a moment, that there are more Pell-eligible students as a percentage of Hiram students than there are of Tri-C students. We as Hiram are here to provide an excellent education to anyone who wants to get it. we'll work with you to make that affordable, and that's the mission of Tri-C. So they're a perfect partner for us, not only in general, but for this initiative, because this is precisely the audience that we should be going towards for this mission. We don't want to just train people in some niche category of American life how to be civil. We want to reach the general population. So it's a perfect partnership, and I want to point out Dr. Matthew Jordan, who's right there, and he has been a wonderful friend of Hiram, wonderful friend of the Garfield program now for several years, and he's the head of their Mandel Center, which is essentially their Garfield Center at Tri-C, and he's here tonight with a bunch of his students. Could you raise your hand if you're from Tri-C? We're delighted to have you. Welcome to Hiram College. We'd be delighted to talk to you about Hiram College further, if that's what you're interested in in this evening. By the way, what you're going to experience tonight, we do every day at Hiram. So this is just the normal Hiram experience. Anyways, we're going to have Marissa come up and introduce these two gentlemen. Before we do that, I have some special thanks, as always. First of all, to Mr. Bill Recker. I don't know if he's here at the moment. He's here at some point this evening. He's in the vicinity, who is the gentleman who made all of this possible in general for the Garfield program. Mr. Mark Logan, who is not here. He's off in Virginia, but he is the main sponsor for our seminar series. Ted Helmut, who I know is here. He's right there. Yeah, and we can recall him. Tremendous friend of the program, not only supports our seminar series, but lets us use his party farm, I guess you'd call it, up the road for our events. So he's a great, great friend. And Michael Canty, are you here? Michael Canty, who is also a great supporter of our program. Just a couple of folks for a special mention. As I mentioned, our president, Dave Haney, is here. Thank you for coming. Lisa Baldwin is here. Thank you for coming. John Louder is here, who is a long-standing supporter of the Garfield program, been a part of it longer than I have. Graduate of Hiram, dedicated civil servant all his life, a wonderful supporter, and will be giving a talk sponsored by Hiram and Gettysburg College's Eisenhower Institute on April 17th in Washington, D.C. That's a new partnership we're establishing. You will be our featured speaker, one of them, on arms control. So we're looking forward to that. Ken Moore, as mentioned, is here. Thank you, Ken, for your support on our advisory board. Diane Batchick is right there. She came all the way, as did John Louder, from Washington, D.C. for this event to see what we're all about. And we're glad to have her. And Hillel Fratkin, a new friend of the program, who also came all the way from Washington. You just had to come from Northeast Ohio, so it's easy for you. Thank you all, though, for coming. We're glad to see you. We're going to have Marissa come up and introduce these two gentlemen, and then I believe each of them are going to just talk for a couple minutes about their backgrounds or whatever they want to say, and then we're going to have a very conversational experience where you can ask questions, they'll respond to them. It's going to be even more interactive than our normal Garfield event. So without further ado, Marissa.
Good evening. I would just like to take a few moments of your time to introduce our two speakers. If you were here for our last semester seminar, you would recognize General Wesley Clark over here, who has happily agreed to return for another great night. So General Wesley Clark is a retired 4-star general of the United States Army who, on top of his many accolades of being a businessman, educator, commentator, served towards the end of his military career as the commander of the U.S. Southern Command and Supreme Allied Commander of NATO in Europe. He commanded Operation Allied Force, an Allied campaign that lasted 78 days. The success of this campaign alone saved 1.5 million Albanians from genocide. General Clark is also a profound scholar. After graduating top of his class at West Point, he furthered his education by obtaining degrees in philosophy, politics, and economics from Oxford University, where, on top of all that, he served as a Rhodes Scholar. He is also a diplomat, having participated in the writing of the 1995 Dayton Peace Agreement. Furthermore, by his nonprofit, Renew America Together, he seeks to promote and achieve common ground by reducing partisanship and division gridlock. His awards include the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Defense Distinguished Service Medal, 5 awards, the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart. As for other speaker in attendance, I would graciously like to welcome Secretary Andrew Card to Hiram. Secretary Andrew H. Card Jr. is the former chairman of the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington, D.C., and served as the interim chief of staff for the George and Barbara Bush Foundation. His time in politics has been a long and storied career, from running the Republican National Convention, being a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, where he also served as the minority whip, to serving as the deputy assistant to the president and director of intergovernmental affairs during the Reagan years. Secretary Card served various roles in the George H.W. Bush administration, such as the deputy chief of staff, cabinet member, and secretary of transportation. However, he may most be famously known as the chief of staff for George W. Bush, where he was also the second longest serving in that position. Here he announced that a second plane had unfortunately struck the World Trade Center on 9/11. But however, he would also be later known as the one in charge for allocating resources to deal with the aftermath from this tragedy. He continued to serve the president until 2006. Secretary Card is also another man who values education, serving as president of Franklin Pierce University, executive director of the provost, and vice president of academic affairs at Texas A&M University, and acting dean of the Bush School of Government and Public Services at Texas A&M. He holds a degree in engineering from the University of South Carolina and attended the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy and the JFK School of Government at Harvard University. Allow me once again to welcome these two great men that we have here today.
General, you should go first, because I understood when you were here before, you blew the audience away. So I want to make sure you go first.
I was going to say, you should go first because you were a high-level civilian official, and civilians always outrank the military.
You don't necessarily outperform them.
Let me just say, first of all, it's a real honor to be invited back to Hiram College. I did have a great time here the last time. It's a pleasure to be here also with Andrew Card. We've appeared before together. I always learn a tremendous amount when he speaks. He's got the in-depth experience of politics, administrations, leadership that probably no one else in this country has. And it's just a real honor for me to be here with you, and thank you for that. And I just want to say, I really liked the little bit of a class that Professor Thompson gave us, and made me think I need to go back and retake political science. I really enjoyed it, and I remember those Federalist papers, because they said the problem of factions, you must let interest counteract interest, and ambition counteract ambition. And it is a representative democracy. And so we don't expect every person to be an expert on every issue. That's the genius of the American system. But I feel really pretty good after the 2022 midterms. I see it as, look, this country's been through 3 major political cycles since the American Civil War. There's the Gilded Age, and then the Progressive Era, and now we're in the age of Reagan. And the question is, is there a 4th era? Will we succumb as Rome did and lose our democracy? A lot of people say that because of the speed of modern communications. Look at the Roman Empire, it lasted 500 or 700 years, and it went on and on and on. We may not last that long because information and issues and things happen much more quickly today. But what I see is, we came out of the Gilded Age because the American people said, enough concentration of wealth. And you've got to take care of ordinary people. A lot of it was here in Ohio, Pennsylvania. The labor movement got started. A lot of immigrants came in, and they were worked to death in coal mines and steel mills and working the railroad and starting with on the oil fields. And they didn't like it, and the labor movement got started. But it wasn't like this. It didn't just suddenly happen. It evolved over a period of decades. we went into the progressive era, really with Theodore Roosevelt, who began to bust up the trusts. And, you know, we had World War I, and we had the Depression, and FDR picked up on the progressive ideas because he didn't have the other ideas to deal with the Depression. Some of the ideas were illegal. He thought he was going to get labor and management together and plan out the economy. And the Supreme Court said, no way. He wanted to do other things, and they weren't legal. But he did put in place three things that were really important. He regulated the securities industries and banks. And, of course, that's a big issue today. He put in Social Security and looked after people. And he fixed the mortgage and home ownership and farm ownership, so a lot of the small people in this country didn't lose their most valuable possessions. The progressive era continued after World War II, and even Eisenhower and Kennedy and Johnson. Johnson finally brought us Medicare. Nixon, he brought us the Environmental Protection Agency. And, you know, Nixon said, we're all Keynesians now. We believe in macroeconomics, the good of the whole, that it's not just about profit and loss, but like everything in life, and what we used to say in the Army, I don't know about the Navy, Andy, but in the Army we always said, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And so we overdid it. I was in the Ford administration as a White House fellow, and Jim Lynn, the director of OMB, and you probably knew Jim, didn't you, Andy? He's a great guy, and he had me make up what he called mess charts, and they showed all the overlapping jurisdictions of programs that had been funded. Let's give women with children an extra $2 a month for milk. Oh no, well, let's also pay their heating bills. Let's give them lunch. And every program had a different subcommittee behind it, and you couldn't rationalize it. We overdid it. Ronald Reagan came in and said, look, government, it's like a baby, you know, you put in nutrition at the top and you know what comes out the bottom. And people laughed, but it started the third major political movement in the country, and which was, get the government out of the way, let the private sector do it. Or as President George W. Bush said, I'm gonna give you your money back. And that's what he said before the first tax cut in 2001, one of the first things the administration did. And this was the age of Reagan. It was the idea that the government can't do it all. You've got to give the private sector and ordinary people a headway. Well, okay, so now what we're seeing is popular discontent rising on the left, especially in America. And what we saw from the midterm elections, I thought, was that, you know, everybody predicted a red wave, but actually it wasn't so much of a red wave. And you could get into the trees and look at each election and say what happened here, what happened there. And there were pluses and minuses, there's no doubt about it. But the overall sweep was that country is the center of mass. The ideas behind the electorate are shifting back toward greater support for community, less admiration for CEOs in business. I'm also a business CEO, and I'm disappointed about that. But it's more communitarian. People are asking, what's in the public good, not just what's in the private good. People are questioning the idea, the basic idea of Adam Smith. Okay, now back in my economics, Ian 301, I used to teach at West Point. You know, it said that if everybody did what's in his best private interest, you get the best results for the public. And this was sort of the age of Reagan, and we sort of went through that. And we're moving away from that now, and you can see it. People like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders had incredible followings. They didn't get their policies in exactly, but Joe Biden has confounded the economists. They all told him, including Democratic economists like Larry Summers and Jason Furman, you're making a big mistake with this American infrastructure bill. You're gonna bankrupt the country and it's gonna go crazy. And, you know, Biden did it anyway. He wanted to give money to the middle and the bottom of the economy to lift it up instead of putting money